At this point, it's hard to imagine Turkey ever joining the European Union. Turkey has now been waiting to join the bloc for nearly 40 years, having first applied to join the European Economic Community way back in 1987, and negotiations have been functionally frozen since at least the 2010s. However, at last week's European Political Community Summit in Budapest, which took place just a day after Trump's victory, Erdogan shocked everyone by reiterating his intention to join the EU, and insisting that Turkey must play a role in any new European security architecture. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the history of Turkey's relations with the EU, how Erdogan is trying to leverage Europe's Trump-related anxieties about its security to restart Turkey's accession, and whether this might actually work. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So let's start with a bit of context. EU-Turkey relations can basically be split into three periods: pre-2005, 2005 to 2016, and 2016 onwards. Pre-2005, Turkey was slowly moving towards Europe, and its eventual inclusion in the European community looked like a possibility. Turkey became an associate member of the European Economic Community, the predecessor to the EU, in 1963, and applied to become a full member in 1987. This didn't quite happen, but Turkey signed a customs union agreement with the EU in 1995, and was officially recognised as a candidate for full membership in 1999. From 1999 until 2005, Turkey's eventual accession looked like a possibility. When he became Prime Minister in 2003, Erdogan used the prospect of EU accession, which was a very popular idea in Turkey, to push the army out of politics and introduce some pretty reformist domestic policies, including scrapping the death penalty and allowing Kurdish language broadcasts. The second phase of relations came in 2005, when Turkey actually formally began accession negotiations. Unfortunately for Erdogan, once the two sides started getting into the weeds of accession, it quickly became apparent that Turkey was unlikely to join the EU anytime soon. In nearly 2 decades of negotiations, Turkey has only opened negotiations on 16 of the 35 required chapters, and only one, on science and research, has been provisionally closed. Realising quite how difficult Turkey's accession would be, in 2005, European leaders insisted on a quote, open-ended process, with no guarantee that Turkey would ever end up joining. Negotiations trickled along for the next decade or so, but it was really in 2016 when it became clear that Turkey wouldn't be joining anytime soon. In 2016, 2 big things happened to EU-Turkey relations. The first happened early in the year, when the two sides signed a migrant deal which basically said that Turkey would stop migrants from the Middle East coming into Europe via Turkey in exchange for billions of euros in financial assistance. The deal was supposed to accelerate Turkey's EU negotiations, but the fact that it didn't, despite its efficacy, actually made relations worse and gave Erdogan an uncomfortable amount of leverage over Europe. The second thing was the attempted coup in July, which Erdogan narrowly survived. Erdogan was understandably furious about the muted reaction from the EU, who were slow to come out in support of Erdogan, and were significantly more critical of the purge of civil servants that followed. Anyway, Turkey-EU relations have been relatively tense ever since, exacerbated by recurring disagreements over Turkey's support for the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, an internationally unrecognised government which controls the northern part of Cyprus, Turkey's expansive maritime claims in the East Mediterranean, which contravenes the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, and Turkey's belligerence in northern Syria, where Turkish forces have carried out a number of offensives, nominally to combat Kurdish terrorist groups operating out of the country. However, Erdogan has made it clear that he still wants to join the EU eventually. In 2023, for instance, he said that he would only let Sweden into NATO if the EU let Turkey into the bloc. And then again, on Thursday last week at the 5th European Political Community Summit in Budapest, only a day after Trump's victory, Erdogan told Macron that he still wanted to join the EU, and held a meeting with the President of Cyprus, Nikos Christodoulides, as well as the Greek Prime Minister and the Albanian Prime Minister. This is the first time that Erdogan has ever properly sat down with the President of Cyprus, and it will have been noticed by the EU, which has been trying to convince Erdogan to recognise the Cypriot government for years. Interestingly, Erdogan has also recently been making overtures to Kurdish separatists, including the Kurdistan Workers' Party or PKK, widely considered a terrorist group. In October, for instance, Erdogan suddenly announced that if the PKK's imprisoned leader renounced violence, he could be freed, and they could begin a political dialogue on how to resolve the so-called Kurdish question. If it happens, this would also help mend relations with the EU, which has previously expressed disapproval at the hardline tactics used by Turkish authorities to suppress Kurdish separatist efforts. So why has Erdogan suddenly taken a renewed interest in joining the EU? Well, we got a hint later that day when Erdogan told reporters that, quote, Turkey's full inclusion in the European Union's defence efforts is indispensable for Europe's peace and security. Reading between the lines here, it seems that Erdogan is trying to leverage the fact that, post-Trump, Europe is trying to develop a security architecture independent of the US, and Turkey could be a useful partner. Turkey has a larger standing army than any European country, with over 350,000 active personnel and a well-developed military-industrial complex. Turkish Bayraktar drones, for instance, are renowned the world over, and Turkey's naval drone, the Marlin, has participated in NATO exercises. Erdogan has basically seen that Europeans are worried about what Russia might do if Trump ditches NATO, and is offering them a sort of Turkish security guarantee in exchange for Turkey's accession into the EU. So, will this work? Well, interestingly, leveraging security to increase your influence in Europe is a very British tactic. Successive UK Prime Ministers have tried to leverage the UK's military strength to get what they wanted from Europe, including Blair, who tried to turn the EU into more of a security federation with the St Malo Declaration in 1998, and Starmer, who's trying to leverage the prospect of a UK-EU security deal to renegotiate the Brexit deal. But these have rarely worked, largely because, well, NATO means that the UK is already signed up to defend most of Europe anyway. Leaving aside the fact that incorporating Turkey would be logistically and politically difficult, Turkey would be the largest member state by population, and it's hard to see the EU agreeing to freedom of movement given the anxiety in certain European countries about immigration, especially from Muslim-majority countries. As a NATO member, Turkey faces the same problems as the UK did. That is, unless Trump actually disbands NATO, in which case Turkey might well be able to leverage its much-needed military might to at least negotiate a closer relationship with the EU. Now, as a TLDR viewer, it's clear that you have a thirst for learning. After all, why else would you have watched a 10-minute video explaining Turkey's EU plans? Now, if you want to continue your learning journey, you really should check out Brilliant. Brilliant is the online learning platform where you learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in maths, data analysis, programming, and AI. These hands-on lessons have you comparing circuits to understand voltage and current, playing snooker to learn the rules of collision, planning your itinerary for an intergalactic music festival on a space-time diagram, and more. That way you'll build your natural intuition while gaining deep knowledge of scientific principles. In fact, Brilliant actually recently launched tons of new data science content, all of which uses real-world data to help you see trends and make better informed decisions. And don't worry, you don't need to be a world-renowned scientist to understand these courses either. Brilliant's courses are designed for learners of any level. Find out more and to try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/TLDR or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks for your support, and thanks to Brilliant for supporting this video.